In one of her past lives, she was a Scottish herb dealer in the 12th century, accused of cursing a man who tried to force himself upon her. She saw the silver of the sword in front of her face before it swung around and came down on her neck. I'm Beth Ann Campbell, and this is Something Weird Happened Here. Welcome to Something Weird Happened Here, the podcast for people who love a twisted tale but aren't afraid to poke at it a bit. We share stories that are postmarked peculiar and then explore the story with curiosity and an open mind. Stay tuned after the show to find out how to submit your strange saga, and maybe we or you will share it on air. Now let's get started, because no matter where you are in this mysterious world, something weird happened here. This tale is postmarked Midwest, USA. Subject line: Spirit Guides and Past Lives. Today we're going to be talking with my friend Denise about her experience with spirit guides, archangels, past life memories, and a near-death experience when she was just 3 years old. Trigger warning, there is one part of this journey when Denise talks about a past life memory when a man tries to force himself on one of her former selves. It's very high level, not graphic at all, but please be aware, especially if you've experienced trauma that might be brought out by even just a brief statement. Denise, welcome to Something Weird Happened Here. This is really going to be there's a lot of something weird happening here in your life.
Oh yeah.
And I love it. I love
I was
to.
always the weird one. So yeah.
Well, weren't we all? Well, when we were talking before, you told me a story, a something weird story about your near-death experience when you were very young. Can you tell me that story again? So for our audience,
I was about 3 years old, and as a mom myself, I understand that kids at that age, they will get into everything if you blink and they're into something. Like, my mother was not doing anything wrong, and as a mom myself, I totally get
Denise, as a Gen
it.
Xer, believe me, my mother used to let us go in the middle of a blizzard, waist-high drifts, no school, the roads are not even plowed. Yeah, sure, go ahead and walk through the forest to your friend's house a mile away out in the middle of the country. Just call me when you get there.
You get there.
We get it.
Yeah.
We get
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
it.
Um, I'm 3 years old. We're camping, and I was over at the playground, and I wanted to get on the swings. And I was waiting my turn because you're taught you need to wait your turn. Well, it got to the point where it was my turn, and a swing came free, and I was going to get to it, but there were swings between me and them going back and forth, and I kind of was trying to avoid that. And somebody else ran and got the swing. It was behind me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well then I'll get the next one." And again, I was trying to avoid being hit by the swings, and another swing came free, and somebody behind me ran and got that one. So the next time my swing came free, it was like, I'm getting the swing. And so I ran for it, and somebody else was coming behind me. They were running for it as well. And there were uh, more baby swings between me and the swing that I was trying to get. And these were the old fashioned milk crate type of swings.
Oh
They were
yeah.
metal. There was a toddler in them being pushed by their parent, and it came up and it hit me in the head.
Oh, so the toddler was in the seat when it hit you? Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's like getting hit with a brick.
yeah. And I don't remember hitting the ground. I think I was unconscious standing up. But woke up on the ground, kind of was in and out a little bit, and finally got up and ran to my mom. And I remember getting close to my mom and thinking, I was about, I don't know, maybe 10 feet from her. And something in me said, it's okay. She's got you. You can let go now. The next memory I have is the hospital room, which was, they tell me, like 4 days later, something like that. I mean, I was unconscious for multiple days.
Oh wow.
What my mom says happened is that I got 10 feet from her and I collapsed and I started having a seizure
Oh my God.
from the head injury. So that's that. And I have later on found that that was a near death experience, and I was between the worlds. And Michael, Archangel Michael, is the one who was with me.
Wow. So, you remember this voice, and when you are recalling hearing this voice, are you recognizing that that voice is not from somebody right there? Is it to your recollection? I know it's hard to remember back that far, but
It wasn't a 3-year-old's voice. It was more, it might have been more like an adult voice, like my adult voice. I don't know. It was a female voice, and it was kind of from off over here on my left. And it was inside my head, but I could sense the positioning was over here, saying, it's okay. Mom's got you. You can let go now.
it kind of sounds like that you didn't think that was somebody who was at the playground, like it was somebody not, or was it somebody at the playground, or you just was it just
No, I was running towards my mom, and I don't think there was anybody within 10 feet of me. I
yeah,
don't.
okay.
I remember not being anybody really in front of me except my mom.
In your adult life, you work with spirit guides. Is that a correct statement? Or
Mhm.
you have, all right. Do you think that that's who that female voice could have been, or do you think it was something else, like a relative, if you were having an NDE or in the process of perhaps being close to the veil?
I suspect it was probably a spirit guide. I have not asked who that was. That's a good question. I should ask who that was.
Yeah, you could ask
Um,
your current spirit guides if that who that
yeah.
was. So you have a lot of stuff going on through your life. So you had this near-death experience in the hospital for multiple days. Do you think that that event kind of kick-started the other stuff that we're going to talk about? Like you just some of the other things that having spirit guides even, for example. Do you think that that kick-started something to allow you? Or do you think it was just an event and it all, you would be the same today as if this had never happened? I mean, how do you feel like this impacted you as an adult in your, I'll say paranormal, it's not the great word, but just unconventional
Yeah.
abilities and things that you do in your life today?
Well, first of all, you can have guides and hear them and not go through a near death experience. Like
Yeah,
that's not a prerequisite.
true, true, true.
Um, but I think it made me more interested in spirituality. I've always had a curiosity about it, and so I wonder if that informed that curiosity. Again, I was young enough that it's hard for me to remember life like before that happened. So I don't really know how much it would have affected me.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah. It's really interesting because the first episode of this podcast that I did, I related an event of from my own youth where I was just petrified, scared of this scratching that I thought was this goblin trying to get into my bedroom night after night. I won't ruin it for anybody listening, but so you have to go back to episode one. But it turned out not to be a goblin, and the whole event really shaped my
Mhm.
it was kind of the one of the very early starts of my number one um just being aware of my surroundings and what's going on, right? And number two,
Mhm.
questioning things and saying, what could this have been? And then three, also taking the step in this case to try to actually work through my fear and figure it out. So I do think that things in our childhood really do impact. They do. We know they do. We know that
Mhm.
good, bad, or
Yeah.
ugly, the stuff that we experience at that age definitely will stick with us. So if we
Mhm.
stay on the topic of spirit guides, so
Mhm.
other than this experience, because you weren't quite sure, when is the first time that you either realized or started working with spirit guides?
I've always had a sense of like I was always that weird one who talked to themselves. And I would be like, I've literally said out loud to rooms when I was a kid. I remember being frustrated, like, you're there. I know you're there. I can talk to you. I can't hear you. I can't see you, but you're there. It was frustrating because I look back at it now and it's like you weren't I don't think I was ready to access it. But I
Yeah,
could I could sense it and be like, I remember getting frustrated sometimes, like, I'm not gonna talk to you because I'm frustrated with this now. And there were a couple of times where I was just like, nope, I'm
that sounds like me talking to my mom. I know you're there. I don't want to talk to you right now. No. Um,
but do you want to know the first time I actually connected with a spirit, or do you want to know?
yeah. Tell me about the first time that you actually connected with one of your spirit guides. That would be awesome.
Well, at this point, I was an adult. I had had an experience at Yellowstone, where I was in the back country. I didn't tell you about this. Yeah, I took a family vacation. My kiddos were with us. My youngest was like 9, and they wanted to go horseback riding in the back country of Yellowstone. So I remember being out in this. I've been on these horses, and there's about 20 of us, and then we've got maybe 5 of the guides around us, the people running the horses, and we come out into this gigantic meadow, and it's a muted day. It's overcast and everything's very quiet. My ears are straining for sounds that aren't there. And I realized just how tiny I am compared to that meadow, and how tiny that meadow is compared to the park, and how tiny that park is compared to the states it's in, and then the states to the country, and the country to the continent to the earth, and the earth to the solar system, and just kind of
Yeah.
going out and out and out and out. And it was like seeing the proportions clearly for the first time, and realizing that I'm this tiny little thing. And yet I am asking, why am I here? And where did I come from? And what is my purpose? I am asking these gigantic questions, and I'm this little speck. I'm still important, even though I am this little teeny speck. And after that, I started reconnecting. We had a friend in the family who was pagan, introduced me to the local pagan community. I started talking to channels there, and they were like, "You're a channel." And I'm like, "What now?" Like, "Yeah, you're a channel." And so
What?
I had them channel guides for me. And I learned how to channel through that, because you have to be careful when you channel. You have to set protection. Because there are beings that will show up that will lie to you and tell you that they're not, that they're somebody else, and they don't have your best interest at heart. And so I set protection around myself, and I asked for a guide that was someone to come through who was for my best and highest good. And I had protection around me. And so because I had other people channel for me, they were like, "Yeah, okay, the guides that we talk to will look out for you as well." So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to do this, and I'm just, somebody for my best and highest good. And I felt a hand on my left shoulder, and I'm in my home alone. There's nobody else there, but I feel a hand on my left shoulder, and then I feel a hand on my chest, and I just feel love, just
Mm.
pure, unconditional love, just blowing into me like a fire hose. I started sobbing, because at the time I felt so unworthy, but it was such a wonderful experience, and I just sort of like choking. I was crying so hard. And so the hand moved off of my chest, and then the hand moved off of my shoulder. And I was like, "No, come back." So I went back to the friend who was channeling for me. And I was like, "Wow, what was this?" And she said it was Kuan Yin. And when you channel, you can ask them who they are. And I should have thought to ask who they were, but I was just sort of blown away by that. Now, Kuan Yin, if you're not familiar with her, she is normally connected with Buddhism, but she is a spirit of love incarnate, similar to the Christ consciousness, which is love incarnate, basically like that. And so that was the very first time, and it was touch and emotion.
So it sounds like some of these experiences that you've had have helped you with your self-worth. Is that a fair
Mm-hmm.
statement?
Mm-hmm.
So, anybody out there, I know there are a lot of people out there that are challenged, suffering, and maybe you feel like you've tried everything. Well, maybe this is something to try. Um, so do you regularly interact with your spirit guides, and are they different now? Is this Kuan Yin, is this person still in your life, or do you have like now personal? Because that she sounds, or they sound like sort of a universal, bigger, you know,
Mm-hmm.
spirit. Is he, she, it a part of your world today, or do you have different spirit guides?
She has come through since. I've talked to her since. I sort of have my 3 main ones that I work with, but I've also worked with a few other ones as well. I started with Gaia, when I started connecting through to talk to one, and actually communicate, like verbally communicate with Gaia, and I can have, like, I'll literally hear her in my head and talk to her.
Wow.
And after several years of working with her, she mentioned, you could work with Bridget, and the Irish goddess Frigid.
Yeah.
She's also Saint Frigid.
Yeah.
She was syncretized into the Christian church. And my experience with her is that whether you call her goddess or saint, you get the same being. She is simply Bridget. I was like, "Oh, okay." And so then I would ask Bridget a question time or two, but I was mostly sticking with Gaia because that's who I'd worked with for a long time. And then I had this sense from Gaia. She just said, "Give me your hand." And so I reached out, like there's nobody there, but I put my hand out. And I had the sensation for taking my hand, pushing my arm forward, and putting my hand out. And I had this, I can see them, and it's not like they're standing in front of me. It's more an impression of them. And Bridget steps out and puts her hand out. And Gaia put my hand in Bridget's hand, closed it, and put her hand on top of it. And so I would literally hand it off to Bridget. Uh,
Wow.
so I worked with Bridget. And then Michael came through the channeling and was like, if you want to talk to me, you got to talk to me direct. You got to learn how to
Oh,
do that.
okay.
Um, and Michael was with me between the worlds when I was a little kid. And he was sort of like big fun teddy bear because at 3 years old, if he'd been soldier on duty, Michael, he would have scared her. He would have scared 3-year-old me.
Yeah.
So he sort of gets to be goofy with me a little bit, which I don't think
Oh,
he gets to do with a lot of people. And then I've also spoken to Azrael, who's another archangel. He's more talked about in Islam. And he's an archangel of death, but death is a transformation. And I have to wonder if that was because of that near death experience, because I had to choose to stay here. And I think that's part of why somebody said to me, one of the channels said to me, that's why Michael likes you so much. He had to argue with me to get me to stay on this side of the veil. And I'm just picturing, oh God, he had to have that argument with a 3-year-old. I don't have a conscious memory of that time to understand what that was like. But as a mother myself, I can imagine.
yeah. Do you ever, and this is, I mean no disrespect when I ask this, but the show is a little bit about being curious about things. Have you ever in your life, as you've had these experiences, have you ever thought, oh, am I schizophrenic or is this just, one of my guests on the show, same thing, who was receiving thoughts that were not his own, and he went out and actually Googled, like, what does this mean? Like, do I need to be on medication, right? So it sounds like you've
Mhm.
you've had those same questions of yourself.
Yeah. When Gaia first came through, and I could tell that was not my voice, but I could hear it in my head plain as day. I was like, what now? I have done like almost 10 years of therapy. And I called my therapist in a panic. I said, I need you to tell me if I'm schizophrenic or another mental illness where you hear voices because I don't understand it. She's like, okay, come on in and we'll break this down. And so we did. We went through this, like, what do they tell you? Do they tell you to hurt yourself, or do they give you good advice? Or, do they stop when you say, hey, I'm in the middle of something, I need a minute? Like, yeah, they stop when I say, can you come back to me after this? I'm done in the middle of this, or they tell me, they give me good advice. They tell me to take it easy on myself and things like that. They're not telling me to hurt myself. They're not telling me to hurt other people. They're not telling me to engage in risky behavior. And we kind of went through this whole big long checklist in the session. And she said, I don't think you're crazy. She said, I don't think you're schizophrenic. She said, even if this was a mental disorder, she said, it's not harmful.
Yeah.
We probably wouldn't medicate you for it because it isn't harming you. She genuinely believed it was a gift. And this is
Yeah.
a woman she's an LMHC, licensed mental health counselor. So
Yeah.
this is not somebody who didn't know what they were doing. And
Yeah.
by this point, I'd been seeing her for a few years. And if she had thought I needed medication, she would have had no problem saying,
Yeah.
Denise, you need to talk to a psychiatrist and get some medication.
She would have seen something else. The fact that you actually even questioned it and went to seek answers, for me, as a person who I am not a mental health expert, I am not a schizophrenia expert, but as just a regular person who, talking to a friend, that automatically tells me, yeah, it's not what it is, because I would, and again, I don't mean to stereotype anybody out there who's challenged. I certainly don't mean to make assumptions or stereotype, but I always think that whenever anybody questions something, and again, it's not telling you to do anything bad or harmful, so that
Mm-hmm.
immediately would make me think, yeah, there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your past life experiences. I guess first, how did you come about, and what is the, what was the situation or situations? Was this something strategic where you were like, okay, I'm going to do past life regression now, or was it just you were meditating? Tell me how that came about that you actually experienced past life um,
Um,
memories.
which one would you like to hear about?
Well,
I
you
have
told me one about a Scottish witch. Can we hear about that one?
Yeah, we can hear about her. She lived, I want to say the 1100s, 1200s, and she was basically an herbal healer and what we would call a witch. But so that's what she did, and she was, I don't want to say she was problematic, but she was one of these ladies that she lived alone at that time, which was like, how dare you live on your own and
Sure.
conduct your own affairs as a woman? But she was not so much well to do, but she had her own land, she had her own barn, she had her own garden, and she was an herbal healer. That's what she did. And there was a situation where a man decided that he wanted her, he wanted to woo her, and she
Mm.
did not want him. He was persistent. She kept telling him no. At one point, he tried to force himself on her, and she fought him off. And then afterwards, he was I don't think she cursed him to make him impotent, but he was struggling with that. And I wonder if that was not a guilty conscience. I don't know. But he was frustrated, and he basically went to the town, the people around there, and said she bewitched me, and now I have this problem. And so he and other people came into her onto her property. And the memory that came through to me, I had to go to my channel that I was seeing, the channel that I was seeing, and say, help me work through this, because all I got was basically like, and there's silver that is like that far off the end of my nose. Like I don't know if you can see it, but like right there. And just my whole field of vision. And then it swings up and away, and I can hear it like swoosh through the air. And there's a wall and there's hay. And what it was is this guy basically said, she's bewitched me. We need to stop her, blah, 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 blah. People came in, and that was a sword. She was in her own barn, and they basically put her on her knees and swung this up and killed her. And then they burned her barn with her in it. And so what I saw was that sword. And yeah,
Yeah. How horrifying to be in this experience where you, when you were, I mean, you're have somebody in this memory f trying to force themselves upon you and then probably being dragged and then executed. I mean, are you able to keep it together where you're like, I understand that this is not happening to me right at this moment? Or, I mean, how do you even work through that?
well, at the time it came through, I just had the silver and then the swish, and then it was black. And so I was like, I don't know what that was. And so I that one didn't really hit me. I did have another one where another past life memory, and this one was violent, and there was video, or there not video, but there was a visual component of that. And I was not okay. I was calling my friend who was the channel, like, we got to talk about this, because I think this is a past life. It was a firsthand memory of this violence. And I was like,
Wow.
and please understand, I when that one hit, I was walking down the street in Seattle. This is not this is not a dream. This is not, you know what I
You're not
mean? This is, I'm walking down the
meditating, you're
street,
not
and it boom.
hypnosis. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Wow.
was worried about something going on in my life, and this just popped into my head, and it was like a movie. And I'm watching this violence happen as though I am firsthand, but it's like it was a 30-year-old male, white male, dark brown hair and blue eyes. I am not a 30-year-old male with dark brown hair and blue eyes,
Wow.
but it was firsthand. And I'm just like, hell is this? Yeah.
Wow. I've done a little bit myself. And this was back in like the mid 90s when there were the books were coming out about, past life regression, and a lot of it, you have to weed through some of it to get to what's really there. But I did some self-hypnosis, and I was telling one of my previous guests about an incident because she was telling me about this concept of soul contracts and about how
Mhm.
you make these contracts and you can re-meet people from your former life, and maybe they've
Mm-hmm.
had are still working on a lesson or have worked through some lessons. So anyway, for part one with my friend Evie, it's really interesting. But I was doing a past life regression on myself. I did a couple of them, and one of them was like went back to caveman times, and I was like the leader of this clan in this cave, and it was winter, and people were starving, and I had to take a child who had died and go out into the what like a blizzard to take deal with or take care of. And I was just felt this horrible guilt about not being able to feed my clan. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that plays into some of my food issues, I think, today. But I
Mm-hmm.
had another one where there was a parade and I was a young woman. This would have been like World War II times, but there was some sort of a parade. And I just remember I was walking along or running to or from something. And I came into this apartment complex and went to a door. And when the door opened, there was a man there, and the man scared me. Like I either didn't expect him, or it was or I did and I just was scared, but like somebody not a good person in this past life. And I realized looking at the eyes, it was somebody who was in my life in the current times, that not an evil person, but just somebody that I just did not, bad vibe, did not get along with at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized the same person when I looked them in the eyes, and I thought, oh my God, that's that same person. So I don't know, of course I always question and go, was I just making it up? I don't know. It felt real. It felt like
Mm-hmm.
it felt like a memory. And it's still
Yeah.
very clear, all the other times where I've maybe meditated and thought about things and imagined and fantasized, and they're gone, and I can't really remember a lot, but these two very, very, very
Mm-hmm.
vivid and very clear. But
They do. And I found that if it's something like that where it is a past life, it is clear, and it feels different. I don't know how else to describe it to you other than it feels different and you can tell. And I wanted to mention, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but I have looked at one of my children, my younger children, or my younger
yes.
child. I have two, who is my kids are grown. The younger one is 28. And I this was years ago, not too long ago, maybe 5 years ago, but I looked at them and I had this sense of, you and I have lived together before. And I had this sense of they and I had taken turns being each other's parent and child. It was a
Ooh,
very strong sense. And it was like this time I am the parent, but I could sense there were previous lifetimes where we were each other's parent and child. Yeah.
wow. So are you, can I talk about you being a practicing witch? Is that a
Mm-hmm.
yeah? So what is
Yeah.
that? What I know you talked a little bit earlier about um some pagan influence early on. Is that what brought you to the point of
Yeah. Because I thought, okay, if I've got this ability, or if I want to step into this, then my theory was I need to know. I want to make sure that if I'm going to step into this and I'm going to find things, then I want to know how to use it safely,
yeah.
and how because I don't want to hurt myself or inadvertently hurt somebody else. And connecting with the pagan community, and who was one of the lady who was the leader of the local pagan community was like, I teach magic classes, and we can, and she basically goes into the basics. She has like 101, 201, and 301, and I've
Wow.
you get the three classes. And so that was kind of how I started, and that was back in like 2014. And so I learned the basics that way, and that helped. And then also seeing other channels and having them come through and tell me things, I learned so much stuff about myself that I didn't know. The first time I sat down with this one lady, she looked at me and she smiled. It was at a psychic fair, and I'd never had a reading with her before. It's like, okay, let's sit and talk. And she specifically worked with angels, and she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "Oh, the fairies are talking to you." And I said, "Really? I didn't think the fair folk bothered with humans." And she said, "Well, it's different when it's one of their own." And I said, "But
Ooh.
I'm not Fae." And she said, "You were." And I'm like, okay, that's something I didn't know. Apparently, I had a past life where I was.
I love the whole concept of witchcraft in the context of especially for women, about being intuitive and sensitive and psychic.
Mhm.
You know, there's all the other stuff too that I think is just really fascinating. I dabbled in paganism for a while, but it was really, if I'm being honest, it was really more of a, I'm clearly not going to be a Christian, and even in spite of my, grandmother's wanting and questioning everything, and so that was sort of part of the evolution to kind of becoming really just sort of not agnostic, um,
Mhm.
borderline atheist, but I'm not quite, I still have, there's still some things that I think, like, which we're not going to go into here, but like the whole concept of dark matter in the universe just fascinates me. And I just wonder,
Mhm.
dark matter and dark energy is so mysterious. And I'm like, could that be part of our consciousness and source? And anyway, a whole other topic, but yeah, so I'm just really fascinated by witchcraft because and plus, as a feminist, I don't love that this happened, but there's such a connection with witchcraft. And even when you talked about your past life, and all I could think of was this guy was probably already impotent and the only thing that could get him off was violence. So,
Mm.
and then somebody probably called him out and said, "Oh," and he's like, "Well, it's the witch that made me, this way,"
Mhm.
when in fact he probably, always was. In fact, maybe he even went to you to, be cured, and then, and she's, I don't know what I imagine that she would have said something like, "Well, it's not going to happen." Um, but there's just such a feminist aspect to it too, that, that strong women
Mhm.
who have been, for really sometimes relatively very minor stuff that today we would just laugh like, "Oh, they're using herbal tea," "Oh, it
Mhm.
must be a witch." So anyway,
Yeah.
just really fascinating stuff. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that, I mean, I could literally go on for another hour, but I like to keep these a little bit short. What is there anything else that I didn't touch upon that you wanted to mention?
Um, I find it interesting you're talking about the feminine aspect of this because I personally, part of why I left Christianity was that it was male, 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 male.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with men. But you know what I mean? But it gets frustrating when they only talk about Mary at Christmas and Easter. And then you
Yeah.
bring this up to them and they're like, I remember growing up, and I'll tell this story real quick because we're getting near the end here. But I remember when I was younger and I was because I wanted that connection with divine. And I would kind of, my parents lived like across the street from a church, basically. And so I would attend church there sometimes, and sometimes I would go with friends. My family was not a church going family, but sometimes I would feel that urge and I would want to go. And I suspect that's because of the near-death experience. I don't know for a fact. But I remember being sad at one church, and the pastor was a kindly older pastor, and he said, "Why are you sad?" And I'm like, "It's all men. It's all boys." And I please understand, I'm like 7 at this point,
You figured it out
and
then.
and yeah, and I'm like, "It's all boys. Like I don't see myself in this essentially." And he said, "Well, God is female too, because if he wasn't, why you wouldn't exist." And I said, "Well, then why do we call it he? Why do we call God he?" And he said, "Well, we had to pick a pronoun, and we chose that one. But you can think of God as she if you want to." "Oh, okay. Thank you."
Yeah.
So, I felt so much better the next time I went to a church. It was, I don't know, maybe a month later. This is a different religion and a different pastor. And I smiled and I said, like, I think I'm imparting a secret. Like, I'm in the know. Like, God is she too.
Yeah.
And he got down on one knee and he looked at me and said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. God is male. I
Oh,
don't ever want to hear you say God is she again. Do you
so
understand me?"
typical. Yeah.
And so I went right back to the I don't fit into this.
And that is
And so
why I'm not a Christian. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
with like I said, I work with Michael, who's male. I work with Bridget, who's female. I've worked with Athena and Artemis and Hecate and Oma, who is a Irish god. I'm happy to work with both. I liked having a heavenly father, but I needed a heavenly mother.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating to me that if you're a Catholic person, then you do talk. I think they do talk a little bit more about Mary. But in Protestantism, like I said, Easter and Christmas, that's pretty much it. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole episode of, the Bible, which is what most Christians go by, was written
mhm.
not by God, he, she, or it, or they,
Hmm.
but by men, and men who were
Hmm.
political and men who were, hundreds of years apart. So I'm not, it doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me, but it's also, I honestly, I don't care if somebody believes in a God. I have no, I feel like you said it, you said a connection with the divine. I have always felt like I'm seeking a connection with the divine, but what drove me out was the utter hypocrisy of people who would read this book that was just laden with murder and just human-like behavior attributed to a God who is supposed to be omniscient, all powerful, all seeing, all knowing, all loving. And there's not a passage in the Bible that where you can put all of those together and say, well, there you go, all loving, all knowing, all seeing, because we know that
Mhm.
if that were true, then things would be very different. Anyway, total other episode, but
And by the way, the universal truth is love.
there you go.
That's it.
Yeah,
And I've had multiple spiritual people that follow different deities in the pagan world be like, "That's the truth. It's
yeah,
love. That's it. You want to get that through the Christ consciousness? Great. You want to get
great.
that through
Do it.
Kuan
Yeah,
Yin? Go for it. Doesn't matter."
yeah. I like that. I like that. That makes a lot more sense and resonates a lot more than, hey, there's a guy up on a throne who's going to judge you because you didn't believe in him and send you to hell. Okay, okay. I guess I'm going to hell that I don't believe
Yeah.
in. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I mean, I mean, there's so much. We didn't even talk about tarot or but I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating to talk with you, and I'm so glad I met you, and that we have this commonality. I mean, your abilities, not man, I have nothing, but I have a venue that I can just talk to fascinating people. So thank you. Thanks for joining this episode of Something Weird Happened Here. If you have a twisted tale that you witnessed, experienced, or heard from a reliable source, go to bethanecampbell.com/somethingweird to learn more and submit your story. If your tale is twisted enough, we'll share it on air during one of our episodes and might even invite you to be a guest on the show. And we're not picky. Your Something Weird Happened Here could be paranormal, psychic, UFOs, near-death experiences, dreams, parallel dimensions, Bigfoot, Chupacabra, or any other weird and unexplained phenomena. We don't discriminate. If you're into paranormal mysteries that are scary, fun, and realistic, pick up a copy of my latest book, The R.I.P. Files, Case of the Demon Drums, the first in a series inspired by real cases that I, Bethane Campbell, worked on when I was a ghost hunter for nearly a decade. Case of the Demon Drums is available on Amazon and most online bookstores. And finally, we would so appreciate it if you would rate and review us on your favorite streaming platform and/or on YouTube. Thanks again, and remember, stay skeptical, but don't run towards the noise.